Vesna, who is an artist, and we talk about the falsity of water.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for doing this, Anik. I appreciate it. She's off in a cloud. So I'm going to talk. I'm actually very happy that I was scheduled to talk a bit later, because most of the topics have been covered. So we've seen a lot of clouds and some ice, not too much, lots of liquid. I'm going to talk about something that's an in-between state that I've been quite fascinated by. But just to remind everybody of our context, it's actually a pretty amazing spot to be here, and being in residence here in this space, and when Roger opened the symposium, he mentioned there's cisterns under us. This was actually built in 1890s as a celebration for bringing water in with solving problems with cholera. And it's got such amazing history that I feel really, really happy to be here in this particular place doing my research, even if what I'm doing is not directly related to water, what I'm doing at this center. I have committed to have a parallel stream, pun intended, with water for the rest of my life. So I will do a bunch of projects, but water is going to keep going. So let me just give you 5 minutes overview of how I started doing my art project in 2005 called Water Bowls. And what you see on the left is one bowl. It consisted of 4 bowls, each of which were half empty or half full, depending on how you look at the situation, except one, the oil bowl, which is almost full. So this one is called Moon, and the idea was to project what you'll see here. I'm just going to do this very quickly. What's projected in the background is a nanofilter. When I started thinking about water and wanting to do a project with it, you have an underwater microphone in there, and then what's projected is a nanofilter that's being developed at UCLA in the Water Center. So I just felt so lucky to be in a place that actually had a center doing research on water, in particular to look at ways where filters can be used in places that are really endangered, with people dying from drought. The second bowl, the idea, whoa, happened. This suddenly went out. Oh, there we go. The second bowl is called Drop. And I actually should have sound, but I'm not going to worry about it too much now. So what I did is I went to a glass maker that normally blows glass for scientific chalices, and I worked with them to actually make it really deformed. He wouldn't do it on spec. He said, look, lady, I always do this absolutely precisely, so you're telling me just mess it up anyway, it's not going to work. So I actually worked with him. Every time a drop falls, a new map from NASA comes up, and what you're seeing is, you're hearing also a drop, and then you also see bacteria. I was discussing this idea with Jim, and he at the time was starting to do these videos for Colgate Palmolive, gave him a ton of money. He said it's okay for me to say this, to create a video of E. coli, how they replicate in your mouth. So I asked him, well, how did you do this? I spit into it and looked at it. So it's, anyway, it looks very poetic. And then when people ask me, what is it? I tell them it's E. coli, replicating. So the whole idea was, and I'll show you the actual video of it. This is the scientific video that actually I didn't mess with at all. It's sped up. Sorry. Should run. There we go. So it's sped up, but it's kind of frightening if you think about it. Okay, so that's E. coli that's replicating in your mouth. Okay, so the next one would be sound. And for this one, I worked with a student of mine. We went to Long Beach Port, and we recorded sound in the port. I started reading up a lot about underwater sound, and in particular, the sound pollution, where you can have sound at decibel levels 1,000 times more than what would be normal here. So some animals actually naturally start bleeding, and it's pretty intense environment. So when you put your hands over this piece, you actually start hearing that sound. I'm not sure why we don't hear the sound, but I don't want to lose time, so I'll just show it to you. So basically what you're hearing as you're messing with the water is with the sound of the underwater sound. And then the last one, as you can see, is half full. I worked with engineers in Jim's lab to create a device that had pennies that would drop, ideally activated from an online source. And if you see here, what I was thinking is data, corporate data, spatial data, scientific data, and how the money and the oil goes in. And the top layer of the bowl is covered with dirty car oil. So in the instructions for installations, I just tell them, go to your local station and ask for dirty oil. And the last time I went to ask for it, this is not invented, the guy said to me, oh, so you found out that you can kill all the weeds like this. And I thought, oh my God, okay. So this, this is the installation. I actually feel very happy with it. It's a good one. For an artist, it's satisfying. I've shown in many places. People love it. And I've been in many shows, including very recently in this one at the St. John the Divine in New York. But all along, I felt like I am just a drop in the water. And it's so great, but it's so much more urgent, and I feel like so much great work is going on. So all we hear about is bad news. How about we show all the amazing work that artists and scientists are doing with water? And so I started looking more into it and discovering that water is really weird. So a little bit of disclaimer here. I am an artist. I work for my intuition. If I had a good science teacher, maybe I would have been a scientist. But because I'm really into it, but I don't have the education. So I just pick brains of scientists, and I kind of make my own deductions that I can't prove. A lot of what I say will probably be wrong. I don't know. But I'm an artist, so I can get away with it. So water is weird. And I will talk about that just for a few seconds. Speaking of, going back to 70s, 80s, right here in France, we had this very famous paper that was brought to my attention by Philip Ball, who is a writer for Nature, and who brought this amazing guide to my attention. Many of you may be familiar with him. I feel that he is one of these scientists that's been persecuted, very similar to Turing. What he came up with, the idea that there's memory in water, probably rubbed the pharmaceutical industry the wrong way, is my guess. I'm not sure what it is, but they really went for him and basically decided that he's a charlatan, destroyed his career, and that this is a kind of a metaphysical theory. So this is a very tragic story, in fact. He wouldn't give it up. He never said, no, I was wrong. They went and tried to replicate what happened in his lab, and they couldn't replicate it. But don't forget, water is weird, so you can't really replicate. In fact, I've discovered, and there's enough scientists here to tell me if I'm wrong, but you cannot even have pure water. So if you're in the lab, you have to, if you have water for your experiments in plastic, you have to calculate how many days it's been in plastic, because it's going to bond to plastic. If you have it in glass, you have to calculate how many days it's been in glass, because it's bonding to glass. It bonds to everything. Ice floats. Why does it float? The whole thing, it just doesn't make sense. So when I started bringing it up, even Jim was like, leave water alone. It's like too complicated. Stop bothering me with this water stuff. And I'm like, this is becoming really interesting. And then water and memory. God, don't touch that. Okay. I want to. Then I got really interested. So, and guess what? Here's a little bit of French for you. But you may know, again, France. We're back in France, and this was not even deliberate. It just happens to be that this drama evolved right here. But Montagnier is a Nobel laureate in medicine who suddenly came up and said, I agree with Benavist, and freaked everybody out in the scientific community because he was an authority. So suddenly we had an authority who basically said, yes, he was right. There is memory in water. And then he did something that's even more dramatic. Can't read this, but I'll tell you. He, because of French law that's very familiar to most of you, when you retire, you have to retire. Even if you're at the height of your intellectual and mental power, you have to retire. So he started having these very wild ideas, really, really interesting ideas in relation to water, memory, DNA, all kinds of wonderful ideas. And guess where he went? To Shanghai, to form an institute at Jingtao University to do this kind of work. So he is a pretty interesting person, and I felt somehow this is really good. The second part that became very interesting to me, that's really crazy, is you may be familiar with Emoto. So everybody laughs at this, and it's very funny because, it's kind of, yes, it's weird, absolutely. But there's something there because there's so many people that believe this and are really kind of going towards it. So what is going on? And Japan, to me, became really important in relation to water. So I started zooming into Japan and looking at artists and scientists who do work with water. Water is at the core of Japanese culture. Even their gardens that are dry are designed by how water goes around. It's just phenomenal, the aesthetics. So I started looking, and I thought I'd give this guy a little bit of, he's like an artist, he's doing some wild stuff, but he's really going into it. But here's something that I got for Anik. He did this project with clouds, where he had a clearing game, how to clear clouds. And I started thinking, you know what, he's actually enacting Buddhistic ideas. He's actually taking these Buddhistic ideas to a molecular idea and bringing it into this kind of larger consciousness, if you will. So the idea of kind of playing this cloud game to make meditations that will change consciousness, I thought this is like as good as any art project. So that's for Anik. Anyway, here's what Jim tells me, who is sick and apologizes for not being here. There's fifth and sixth state of water. So it's like, yeah, all right, maybe there's fourth. He's really, really skeptical about the whole thing. But he brought this to my attention, which makes water even more weird. So you have ionic water and then superionic. And these are the states here kind of visually explained. So if you imagine us, the Earth, there at that little melting point, that's us, and then you're going into space, and I'm sure that Roger could explain this 10 times, 100,000 times better than me, and I'll ask him to. What's happening here is that under intense pressure, water becomes metal. How weird is that? And that explains the magnetic fields in the universe. And so if you think of macro, micro, and you think of Mars and what's going on in life and us, then you start wondering what's going on. I was last year, while here in residence, I went and visited Bristol University, Professor Meyer and Massimo, who did some, and I kept bugging them about water. They were doing some experiments with it. The thing about nanotech is that when it works on this kind of level, molecular level, you actually need a medium to access with the scanning tunneling microscope the molecule. That medium is water, but that water is not liquid. It's like a gel state, right? So I became really interested in this medium for looking into molecular level and thinking about it. Massimo introduced me to Gerald Pollack work, who, Washington, Seattle, came up with this whole idea of fourth state of water and the idea of exclusion zones. So what you have is this zone where there's like an in-between state. And they're focused on that as the fourth state of water. So this became very metaphorical to me. And I'll just show you a couple more weirdnesses about water. So what you have here, if you look at how these molecules are bonding, you have room temperature, and then you have liquid, and then you have superionic. Look at how they're forming. It's actually pretty incredible. Okay, so that was the first half of my talk. The second half, I think, 10 minutes? Trying to get a sense of time. I didn't look, I normally look. I should look to you. Last year, in the midst of all of this, actually while here, I was asked by the Contemporary Museum in Poland to come up with an idea. They were curious to see what would an artist come up with if they had to curate. So I actually curated a show called Fourth State of Water that I'll show you the catalog and explain to you briefly. You can look at this catalog online. But I'll also tell you that it's probably the last time I'll curate a show. I'll go back to my artist mode, because it's like, oh my God. The one thing that I did gain from it is respect for curators, and also I'll be so much nicer to you guys. It was like, what is going on? I have to beg people or chase them or get wrong stuff, and awful. Anyway, but it came out good, and I'll explain it. What I decided to do is actually invite scientists and artists who work with water and make the epicenter Japan, because Fukushima happened, and I really felt like this is the epicenter, the message to humanity. And I wanted to really make the idea of the fourth state of water as the overarching kind of framework, the metaphor to hold a network and to look at artists in different situations, so that you basically have from macro to micro, you have really political projects, you have really poetic projects. There's two people in the room who were in the show. Dennis, who did a piece with Richard Clark with Portugal and Portuguese water, and then Mana, who did Turkey. And we did a lake, Omaya, which she'll talk about in the Pachacucho. So let me just give you a brief sense of how this worked. And then I want to invite you to participate. So I did manage to weirdly get Gerald, oh, sorry about that. I should quit this. You turn off your phone, I'll quit Skype. Okay, so this is a brainstorming session dealing with talking to neuroscientists, environmentalists, and others about how water and environment is related to our brain. And then Gerald Pollack, who discusses fourth state of water, actually wrote an essay that I encourage you to read. We have a piece, we have tears, we have ice. Japanese artist Nobuko Nagasawa, who did this beautiful fiber optic wave that actually is connected to waves in Japan. Just wonderful, amazing work that continues. Carla Brunet is from Brazil, and she has a whole network of artists that she works with dealing with water. So that's her installation. This is Richard and Dennis did this wonderful piece. And then Suzanne Fuchs is from Australia, and they have huge problems with water, of course. But she has another huge network. So what I discovered is that I'm not the only artist who's really interested to extend out, that there's many like-minded artists. And that's how I started curating. I started looking who is the egocentric artist and who is the ecocentric artist. And the egocentric ones I would just kind of give up on, or say, or just not follow up, like begging you, but go to the eco ones. And so what happened is that for each artist, I would get at least 20 or 50 leads more to other science, environmental projects, all kinds of stuff. So this is Suzanne, who did a whole online thing that I'll tell you in a second. Du Harrison is in Bristol. She worked with the whole group of students. Takashi Kagami is a physicist from Japan who works in artificial intelligence and life, and he did this beautiful piece. If I didn't tell you he was a scientist, you wouldn't know. Hideo Iwasaki also, I met him in Tokyo, and I was so impressed because he has 3 artists in his lab. And this piece he did he actually sampled water from different lakes, and he did this absolutely gorgeous piece. Also, I never actually said this is a scientist, but if you read the bio, you go, oh wow, he's a scientist. Huji Meng is from Shanghai. He did this beautiful piece, pieces of shipwreck, and then inside of it, videos of memories of lost memories with all the changes in China. Gil Kuno is from Japan. He worked with vapor, a beautiful piece actually, lives in LA. This is his piece. And then Linda Lai from Hong Kong, very political piece. Nobuho, who I showed you a little bit earlier, did a gorgeous piece as well. Japan, lives in New York. Mizuko Oka and Yasuhiro Hashimoto and Takashi worked on this gorgeous piece on visualizing Twitter feeds around Japan. And they're looking to, if you look at the aesthetic of it, it's actually quite beautiful, but it's also meant to be used for future kind of drastic situations such as Fukushima. Again, it's engineers and scientists. Joao Vasco is from Portugal, who lives in Hong Kong. Ellen Pao is from Hong Kong. Sylvia's from Venice, Italy, and she did this piece on pollution and mafia, and how mafia has taken charge of water and pollution. This is an animation piece that she did. And then Mana will talk about her work. I hope she's here from Barcelona. That's her piece, very gorgeous. Claudia Schmag from Germany. Alicia from Barcelona. Pinar Yildiz from Turkey. Jiang Zi from China, working on tears, and I found actually a scientist who also is looking at tears as a scientific project, which was really cool. And then I got Philip Ball to write this essay that I actually discovered and learned from. So instead of me summarizing it for you, you can read it. It's actually fantastic because he goes through the whole logic of it, and e-logic, if you will, about water. And then we put together a symposium where we connected to Suzanne Fuchs. So we had people who were online, on site. Machiko Kusahara came from Japan, and she showed us a number of amazing works of artists. And so briefly, I'm just showing you, and then we had workshops also with water. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you and invite you to is a site that we're working on now, that we'll continue working on and plugging away. So it's called Fourth State of Water of Water Bodies. These are projects that we already have, where you see from different parts of the world. It's organized by ports, so we're in a major port. So Marseille has to have a major presence on this site. And then sources. And sources would be streams, rivers, small kind of things that you're attached to. And then you have, so if you see here, so if you look at this, these are projects that already have been loaded by artists and scientists doing work with water. And again, I'm not going to go into details, just to explain how this works and to invite you to participate. So if you go into Keepers, the idea is that once a month you would have a water keeper. And we decided to do it every 22nd of the month because March 22nd is World Water Day. So we keep building up until we come to World Water Day, and we keep expanding it. And so Claudia Jacques is the first one, because she actually worked with me on developing this site. She's from Brazil. And so what she does, and what a water keeper does for a month, is give us projects, books, resources, whatever interests, informs that person, and creates their site. But that all goes into this large database. So this is one of the projects that she's listed. She has a whole bunch where you see the location, you can find out a little bit about it, and you can link further if you want, right? And then we have events, so whoever is in charge of the site can put up events. And so we're starting with that, and we can go in here, and hopefully Anik becomes a water keeper, and we have a bunch of stuff on clouds or this event. And then finally, not to take more time because I know you can just go online and do this, what I'm doing now too is news. So for instance, you can go into BBC and find out that there's all kinds of strange thing going on with water. So we have hash water tag looking for all kinds of news on water. And then here, I was twittering on what you guys were doing while I was sitting there. So all of it is connected to links and then directly to the database, right? I can't maintain this, but if there's a person who's in charge for a month, that becomes their space, and then we can all just keep growing the site. So the idea is also that you somehow filter this. And the fourth state of water, if you read what Gerald wrote about, he'll tell you that it totally changes the way we're taught chemistry or how water works, how the water molecule works. To me, as an artist, that means we're going to change our minds. We're going to change our understanding of the very essence of life. And so that becomes the metaphor for kind of gathering into a collective consciousness where we really look at water from macro to micro. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.